Everyone had just lifted their glasses to toast when my mom slammed hers down so hard the sound cut through the room like a gunshot. The chatter stopped instantly. "I can't believe," she began, her voice trembling but loud enough for the whole table to hear, "that on my own child's birthday, I'm treated like I don't matter." I froze mid-smile, my hand still holding my drink. She stood up, her chair scraping the floor in a way that made the hairs on my arms stand up, and pointed at the head of the table, currently occupied by my husband, who had been helping coordinate the evening. "That's my seat," she snapped. "That's where I belong." But no, apparently I'm just a guest in my own family now. Gasps, awkward glances, the rustle of people shifting uncomfortably, it all blurred together as she reached for the stack of wrapped gifts in front of me, scooping them into her arms like she'd just decided they were hers to take. "Enjoy your little party without me," she said, and with one last dagger of a look in my direction, she walked out, the door slamming so hard the candles on the cake flickered. I just sat there, heart pounding, surrounded by silence, wondering how a day meant to celebrate me had once again turned into a performance about her. If you've never grown up in a family where a chair could decide the mood of an entire gathering, consider yourself lucky. In our house, the head of the table wasn't just a piece of wood and upholstery, it was a throne. And my mom had claimed it for as long as I could remember. Birthdays, Christmas dinners, even random Sunday lunches, it didn't matter whose occasion it was, that seat was hers. She said it was tradition, but really it was about control. From that spot, she could see everyone, direct the conversation, correct anyone who said something she didn't like. She could make sure the spotlight never drifted too far away from her. Growing up, I never questioned it. I thought every family operated like that. But as I got older, I noticed how suffocating it felt. Friends who came over would comment on it, how odd it was that no one else ever sat there, how mom would actually stop someone if they tried. My husband saw it for the first time at our engagement dinner. We'd arrived early, set the table together, and when she came in, she stopped cold, eyes locked on him because he was sitting at her spot. I watched him stand up, confused, and she slid in without a word, smiling like she'd just won something. I laughed it off at the time. He didn't. After that, he started pointing out other little traditions that always seemed to put her in control. She cut the cake first. Even if it wasn't her cake, she opened gifts with the person they were for, as if they were joint presents. She gave toasts that were mostly about herself. It wasn't malicious in the cartoon villain way, it was quieter, the kind of constant centering that wears you down without you realizing it. But the thing about years of these tiny shifts is they add up, and when you finally try to move something, like a chair, the whole structure shakes. Last year's birthday had been the first time we'd even thought about changing the seating arrangement. We'd booked a restaurant with a big round table, no obvious head, thinking it would diffuse any tension. We were wrong. Halfway through the appetizers, she leaned over to me and whispered, "I don't like this setup. I can't see everyone." I smiled tightly, told her it was fine. She didn't push it then, but I noticed her talking louder, gesturing more, as if to make up for not being in command of the room. Later, she told me privately that the night had no flow because no one was directing the conversation. That was code for she wasn't in charge. My husband and I laughed about it afterward, but it stuck in my mind. I started to realize how many of our family memories were built around her preferences, not the actual event we were celebrating. When my brother got a promotion, the dinner somehow became a speech about how she had inspired his work ethic. When my cousin announced her pregnancy, Mom turned it into a nostalgic monologue about when she was pregnant with me. People let her. We all did. Maybe it was easier than starting a fight. But I also started to see how many moments had been quietly stolen from the person they belonged to. So when this year's birthday came around, I told my husband, we're not doing that again. No head of the table, no show-stealing speeches, just a normal dinner where the focus is actually on the person we're here for. And for once, that person was supposed to be me. The restaurant we chose this year was perfect, or so I thought. Long, rustic table, dim lighting, candles, and enough seats that no one's spot screamed throne. We arrived early, set out little place cards so everyone knew where to sit. Mom was in the middle, flanked by her boyfriend on one side and my aunt on the other. My husband was at one end, me at the other, so I could actually see and talk to everyone. It felt balanced. When she walked in, her eyes immediately scanned the table, and I knew. "Oh," she said lightly, "interesting choice." I smiled and said, "We thought it'd be nice to mix it up this year." Her lips twitched, but she said nothing. Throughout the appetizers, she seemed fine, laughing, chatting, sipping her wine. But I caught the little digs, the comments about how some people like to sit where they can see the whole room, or tradition is important, you know. My husband squeezed my knee under the table, silently telling me to let it go. And I tried. I really did. But I could feel the tension building, like the static before a storm. By the time the main course arrived, she was quieter, almost sulking, but still polite enough that I thought maybe we'd get through the night without an incident. I was wrong. It started with the toast, because of course it did. My best friend stood up, glass in hand, and began saying something sweet about the first time we met in freshman English, and how I'd turned into the kind of woman who made community feel like home. And Mom smiled wide as if she were about to be mentioned. Then her smile faltered when my friend kept the spotlight on me. Halfway through, Mom leaned across my aunt to whisper, loud enough for half the table to hear. Traditionally, the mother gives the first toast, and my aunt made that soothing noise people make around ticking bombs. When my friend finished and everyone clinked glasses, Mom rose without waiting for me, lifted her wine, and launched into a monologue about how, when I was pregnant with her, I always knew she'd be headstrong, and she gets her hospitality from me, and I taught her everything she knows about setting a table, and it could have been harmless nostalgia if not for the way she kept glancing down the table at my husband sitting at the end like a human exclamation point. Then she said, "And as the matriarch, I've always sat where I can care for my family best," and she gestured to the head of the table like a flight attendant pointing at the exit. A few people chuckled nervously. My husband squeezed my knee under the table again. A silent question, let it pass. But the room had already shifted, eyes sliding between us like we were the entertainment. I took a breath and said, "Gently, Mom. Thank you for the toast. I'm really happy you're here. Tonight the setup is different so everyone can see everyone, and I'm at this end so I can talk to both sides." And I smiled like this was a normal conversation and not a negotiation with a storm. The server arrived with mains, blessedly breaking the tension, and plates landed like peace offerings. For 15 minutes, we all made small talk and ate, and the air thinned just enough that I thought we might dodge it. Then my cousin's toddler toddled to the end of the table and leaned against my husband's chair, and Mom said, from her spot in the middle, "Sweetie, don't bother Uncle, come to Grandma," and the toddler, being a toddler, ignored her. Mom's jaw tightened the way it does when she thinks she's losing her grip. She stood, walked to the end of the table with a practiced smile, and said, bright as a stage light, "We're going to do cake now, and I'll sit here so I can cut." Her hand already on the back of my husband's chair. My husband looked at me. I shook my head, tiny. He said, calmly, "We're good here. Why don't you stay by the cake, and I'll bring the plates down?" And Mom's smile cracked. "I'm the mother," she said, softer, which somehow made it worse, "and I sit at the head. That's how we've always done it." And the room went still again, forks hovering, conversations evaporating. My heart thudded. I stood up, my voice gentle but firm. "Mom, this is my birthday. I love you, and tonight we're not doing heads and thrones. We're doing family. Please sit down." And for a second, I thought she might. I watched her shoulders square, watched all the years of habit and entitlement gather themselves in her spine, and then she put both hands on the chair and said, "To everyone and to no one, apparently I don't have a place in this family anymore," and she pushed past. My husband reached for the stack of wrapped gifts by my plate, yes, the ones with my name on the tags, and pulled them into her arms like a protest march. Someone gasped. Someone else said her name in a warning tone. The server froze, holding a tray of water like a statue. Mom's voice rose, bright and brittle. "Enjoy your little party without me." And she marched to the door, gifts sliding, tissue paper sailing like confetti in reverse, and the door slammed so hard the candles shivered. I stood there with the cake knife in my hand and the feeling of a birthday ricocheting into a story I would have to explain for years. For a few seconds, no one moved, the way people don't move after a car backfires because they're waiting to find out if it was a gun. My husband set his napkin down and murmured, "I'll go." But I caught his wrist because chasing after her would have turned the restaurant hallway into a stage. My aunt began apologizing to the table as if she'd planned any of this. My cousin whispered, "Should we?" and trailed off. Because the truth is, no one knows the choreography when an adult throws a tantrum. I took a breath, lifted my glass, and said, "I'm okay, I promise. Let's cut the cake, because momentum is a bomb." The server, bless her, reanimated, slid the cake in front of me, and my best friend started a slightly shaky chorus of "Happy Birthday" that the table rallied around like a lifeline. We cut, we passed plates, we made small jokes about wax on frosting, and the room recalibrated. Then my phone buzzed. A text from Mom, long enough to require scrolling, full of lines like, "I have never been so humiliated. You let your husband disrespect me. Everyone saw how you sidelined your own mother. You have changed." And the last one, the one that found the soft spot she always aims for. "I hope you're happy with your new family. I guess I'm not needed." I put the phone face down and kept slicing. 5 minutes later, my aunt's phone lit up. Then my cousin's. Mom had moved to the group thread, sending a play-by-play that omitted the part where she tried to physically relocate. Another human being. The messages were a hurricane of wounded pride and rewritten history. My brother cleared his throat and said, gently, "Maybe we should just let her take the head next time." And my husband, who is kindness wrapped in boundaries, said, "Or maybe we don't feed behavior that ruins other people's milestones." And the table shifted again. I looked at my brother and said, softly, "I'm not a child hosting a tea party. I'm a grown woman at my own birthday." And he held up his hands in surrender. After cake, a few guests slipped out early with careful hugs and tight smiles, and some stayed to stack plates. Bless them. The server boxed what Mom had walked out with. Because apparently you can march out with other people's gifts and the world still keeps turning, and handed me the bags like they were very fragile or very heavy. When the last person left, the restaurant felt too quiet. The kind of quiet you only get after performing normalcy for an audience. I sat there with my husband in the candlelight and finally let my shoulders drop. He said, "I'm proud of you," and I cried the kind of tears that come when you've chosen the hard thing in public. The next morning, I wrote my mother an email because texts turn into landmines and phone calls turn into spin cycles. I kept it short enough to read, long enough to be clear, that I loved her, that I was done with the throne at the table, that future invitations would come with assigned seating, and that any attempt to commandeer the head, cut the cake first, or redirect the celebration would mean she would be asked to leave before she could make a scene. I wrote that my home and my milestones are not stages for anyone else's need to be centered. I hit send with hands that shook. Then I put my phone on Do Not Disturb and went for a walk, because you cannot stare at a boundary and expect it to hold by lunch. She had replied with 2 paragraphs of wounded prose and 3 of accusation. How I'd been brainwashed. How my husband doesn't respect family hierarchy. How traditions matter. How I had humiliated her in front of everyone. And then the line she always uses when she senses she's losing the room. "I guess you don't want a mother anymore." I did not respond. Instead, I forwarded my email to my aunt and brother and said, "For transparency, this is the boundary going forward. If Mom attends, this is the rule." And my aunt replied with a non-committal "understood," and my brother sent me a thumbs up and a separate text that read, "You know this will explode at Christmas." And I wrote back, "Then we'll host a Christmas where everyone sits anywhere and it's still Christmas." And he said, "You're brave." And I realized bravery looks boring from the outside. It looks like assigned seating and a cake knife staying in the right hands. 2 weeks later, Mom posted a cryptic status on Facebook about being disrespected by the people you gave life to, and a handful of church friends commented with heart emojis and praying for you, sweetie, and I resisted the urge to clarify because public arenas are her oxygen. A month after that, she sent a test balloon invitation to lunch with the subject line talk. And I agreed, but at a coffee shop, not her house. She launched small, with I only wanted to help, and then larger, with it's not about control, it's about respect. And I said, calm as I could, respect is not a chair. Respect is celebrating someone without making it about you. And she blinked like I'd spoken a language she almost understood. Eventually she said, so what if I promise not to make a scene if I sit at the head? And I said, no, and the word hung there like a new piece of furniture in an old room. The next holiday we hosted, we used place cards again. She arrived, scanned the table, took her seat in the middle, and was quiet for the first 20 minutes the way swimmers are quiet right before they surface. She made it through dinner without exploding, and then, during dessert, she said, too loudly, I guess I'm not the mother here tonight, and I felt the room tilt, and I said, evenly, you're my mother. You are not the host. If that's too hard, you don't have to stay. And a small miracle happened. She stayed, and the sky did not fall. Later, when everyone left and the house smelled like cinnamon and candle smoke, I sat on the floor in the glow of the tree and thought about the little girl I used to be. The one who believed a seat at the table could tell you who you were. I thought about the woman I am now, the one who knows your seat is wherever you choose to sit, so long as you don't try to sit on top of anyone else. And I wondered, the way I always do when I tell this story, if it had been your birthday, would you have handed over the head of the table to keep the peace, or would you have let the peace break so you could build something better in its place?